Okay, everyone, welcome to the new substance education webinar format that we have. Just let me know here in the live chat window if you can hear my audio okay, and if so, we will jump right in and get started. Okay, everyone, welcome to the new substance education. Okay, perfect. Thanks, guys. All right, so here we go. We're going to start here with a new format. We've moved our webinar here to YouTube. So we had WebEx before. We had a lot of problems with WebEx, especially recording the videos and being able to get those back to you for offline viewing and such. So now with YouTube, we'll be able to handle this in a much better way. And so also I'd like to apologize for last week. We had to cancel the webinar at the very last minute and we weren't able to get responses out in time. So again, I really apologize for that, and I'm glad that you were able to join us this week. Okay, so like I said, we're going to go ahead and get started. And so as I'm kind of going through the webinar, if you have any questions, just go ahead and type them in here to the live chat. I'm going to be watching for questions, and we can just keep this really open, and we can also just see if if there's questions, we can answer them as we go and so on. All right, so what we're going to do here is take a look at some of these new filter options that we have in Substance Designer 5.6. We did release some training on this, but here we're just going to take a little bit more of an in-depth look at some of these new filters. We're also prepping new releases for Substance Designer as we start the new year here coming up pretty soon. We've got GDC coming, which we're going to have a lot of new announcements and so on. So like I said, today we're going to focus in here on these new filters and such. All right, so let me just come over here and take a look at what we have. So what we're going to do is first take a look at blending materials based on height information. So what I have here is just kind of this real simple demo scene that I've worked up, and what it's doing is it's utilizing a couple of these resources here, and these resources are scanned information. So if I just double click here in my 2D view, you can see that I've got this scanned data here. And so I'm also going to check with our team to see if I can send out this this entire source file so you guys can have these sample scans as well. So I need to check to make sure that that's going to be okay. Okay, so like I said, we're going to talk about being able to blend some materials, and we're going to do that based on this height information. So let me just check here. A couple questions coming in about not being able to hear. Let me just take a second here to address this in the live chat. All right, so yeah, just typing in some information here into the live chat just to make sure I can address that sound issue. There is a bit of a delay here, so it could be, the moment I had kind of a pause there between getting started in that very first audio check. Okay, looks like we do have some results here that everything's good. So let's just continue going forward. All right, so like I said, we're going to take a look at blending materials based on height. So let's take a look at a couple materials first. So here I have a substance here that is just scanned information. So if I just come in here, we'll take a look at what this is. So I'll just right click and just drag and drop this here into my 3D view so we can view this material. And let me just change my views around just to make sure so we can see this a little bit more clearly. And so let me check one other thing here. So it looks like my ambient occlusion and my height are kind of missing from this. So one of the things I want to make sure, of course, is that I'm using these outputs. So you'll notice here that I've got this substance and I have my outputs, and then I have kind of like this light kind of gray shading around these main outputs, like base color, normal, rough, and metal. But my ambient occlusion, my height, they're kind of left off on their own. And when I hit 3 on the keyboard to go into my material mode, these guys here are kind of left behind. They're not compiled together. So if I just jump into this roots graph here, I'm just going to show you a quick fix for this in case you run into this problem. And so it's just a simple matter of my group is not set. So the group to this is just going to be just simple material. So I'll just copy and I'm just going to paste it here into this guy as well. And where I'm getting that from is just all your outputs, just if you want to group them together, they just all need to have the same name here for the group. And it could be anything. All right, so let's run back over here to that demo. So one question that just came in here was asking, was it tiled in substance? This particular substance here, let's see, roots, drag and drop this guy in. This particular substance that we're working with, oops, I'm sorry, I already have this instanced. Let me just place this here into my viewport. This actually isn't tiled in substance. So if I hit the space bar, this is a tiling texture. But what I actually have here are, these are just scans. If I just jump back into roots so we can see what this is I just imported in the scan textures and just simply plugged them here into outputs. And that's how I just made this into a material. This is content that's coming from substance source. How these were created specifically, I'm not 100% sure if they were tiled in design or not. I believe that they were, because these are all compiled through to work in Substance Source, which essentially were all generated within Substance Designer. So this scanned information here was set to be tiled probably within Designer, but I'm not 100% sure. But just for this sake, what I've done is just taken those image maps and just brought those in and connected those to outputs to make a material. And I'll work that way quite often if it's something where I have external textures, like either from a different kind of texture library, or in this case, it was just some scanned information. And I just compile it down to a substance graph so that I could use it here within another substance graph when we take a look at blending and things. So again, I'm just going to bring these guys in here, and we don't need this extra one. So now we have everything set. Let me come over here to my materials. One of the things that we get asked a lot on our forums, and this will be kind of vital for you guys as well when you're addressing things with students, is that if you look at this, it looks like there's not a lot of height displacement happening here. So what you want to do is come over here to your materials, and first, underneath definitions, you want to make sure that you're using the physically based metallic roughness, but you want to make sure that you're using parallax occlusion or tessellation. So here in this case, I'll try using parallax occlusion here. So now that I have that, I can come over here to my material height and I can just adjust this here. And if we look here in our viewport, this is actually giving us a bit of a depth type feel to it. So here I'm just, like I said, using parallax occlusion to that. Another question here about scanning the textures. I did not actually scan these textures, but I believe they were created using photogrammetry, yes, like some type of scanning device was used to create these materials. Like I said, again, these are coming from Substance Source, so they were created by some of our partners who are creating scans. Some of the scans are created, using a scanning machine to do that. Some of the content in Substance Source is actually is actually completely procedural as well. So it could be a mix or match of both. So some of it is embedded textures with that utilize scan information, and some of it's completely procedural. All right, so now that we have this here in place, what we're going to do is, again, like I said, we're just utilizing this height information to that. But you got to make sure that your shader here is set to either parallax occlusion or tessellation. All right, so now what I would like to do is be able to take this this roots, and I'd like to blend this. So let's take a look at another material that we have. Let me try this rocky ground here. So I'm just going to drag and drop, bring this guy in, and of course this guy has got a couple outputs that are not grouped correctly. So just really quick, let me run in here into my rocky ground, and then I'm just going to do what I did before, is I'm going to just set my grouping here for my AO. So this guy here is material, and same thing here for my height. And I'll save that. Okay, one question. Can I go over the parallax node once more? For that, do you mean like the parallax setting for the shader, or do you mean a specific node? All right, so here, going back over to my graph, where we're going to start to blend these materials here. Oh, I left my ambient occlusion out. Let me go back to rocky ground. Spelled it wrong. All right, so here we've got our two materials now. And what I'm going to do here, just another kind of trick. You can take these outputs and or the outputs of this graph here, this instance graph, and I can plug these into the outputs of Designer. And that's a way to view my outputs in this 3D view. But another quick way to do that when you have the channel set up correctly is you can just right-click this node and just drag and drop it into the 3D view, and it's going to it's going to let you just preview that material's outputs directly in the 3D view. And I use that often as just kind of a quick way instead of hooking up, outputs and so on. So anyways, that's just another way to work. And I'll tell you what, I think I would also like to just come over here to my environment maps and just choose something a little different. Let me just put this in here. Okay, there we go. All right, so what we'd like to do is finally get to the business of blending some of these guys. So let's take a look at that. So here I'm just going to hit my space bar, and I'm going to do a search for material, let's see, material height blend. So it's a new node that we have here. So we'll bring this guy in here, and it's going to give us here these two inputs. So if we first look at this node, and this works, this kind of process that I'm showing here, this goes for any of the nodes that you're going to use to do any type of blending inside of Substance Designer. So the first thing you need to do is come over here and set up your channels. I say that because Designer will support both specular gloss and metallic roughness PBR workflows. So you need to set up your channels correctly so that everything will blend. So in this case, I'm not using the diffuse specular workflow. So I'm just going to turn off all of these channels here like this that I don't need. I am using ambient occlusion, so I want to make sure I enable that. So now that I have that set up, I'm ready to start blending these particular materials here, these two nodes. Now, let's just grab our roots and plug this guy into here, and then let's just grab our background, our rocky ground, and plug that into here. And then I'll just middle mouse, click and drag, and just add this here to my 3D view. And so here's kind of what we're getting. Now you'll notice here that this node here is rendering at 256. So if I just double click here and I go up to my base attributes, you can see that this particular node is set to parent times 1, which just means I want to inherit the resolution of the base graph. If I just double click an empty area, that always takes you to that root level. So this node here, it's set to input times 1 on this case. And so what we're going to do for this guy, let's just go back up to our main graph here. And I'm just going to set this to an absolute resolution of like, let's just do 1K here. So let me just set this up. And I'm just waiting for this to kind of recompute. All right, so now we're taking this node and I want it to be set to relative to parent. these textures I'm working with here are all 4K, these scans. And so I don't really want to work with just 4K because it's kind of bogging down my system that I have right here right now. So that's why I have this set to this node to be relative to parent, and my parent resolution here is 1024. So I double click in an empty area, take me to the root level so I can see what this resolution is. All right, so now that I have that, let's come over and just take a look at some of the sliders and kind of options that we have for this. And it's actually quite simple setup. So you can see there's not a lot of control. So for example, we have our height offset. And as I start to adjust my height offset here, you can see that I can start to blend this material based on that height information. So here we get some of these roots that are going to have a higher height depth information. They're going to be on top, and then some of this, some of this kind of rocky ground is now falling down within kind of these cavity areas of that height map, which gives me a kind of a realistic blend of what I want to work with. And then I also have like a contrast setting to this as well. So, here I'm just kind of trying to blend this into this contrast setting. Let's try something maybe more like this. Now, you have a mode here for balanced height, and you have bottom height priority. So if I switch this to bottom height priority, I'm going to, well, basically kind of weight that blending to be the height map that's on the bottom. So in our case, that's going to be the height information from this rocky ground. So here, I'm just going to set this back to balanced height. And then I have the ability to control, again, like I said, my height offset. Now, another thing that's really powerful about this tool here is this albedo matching. And I'm going to showcase or show another node that this albedo matching is utilizing internally later on in the stream when we talk about color matching. But this albedo matching is really nice. So if we take a look at what we have here, so I'm just going to double click so we can take a look at this node, kind of its base color here in the 2D view, and you can see the kind of tonal hue range that it has. It's kind of more of a warmer tone image. And if I double click to look at the roots, you can see that this has more of kind of a balanced, I would say closer to like a cooler tone range that we have. So we have these two different ranges that we're dealing with. So now when we take a look at this albedo matching, what we can do, if I start to increase this guy, we can start to try to match the albedo for both of these. So if I turn this all the way down to 0, that's going to be no albedo matching. You can see that we are seeing the two different ranges. So here we have kind of that warmer tone from our ground, and then here we have that cooler tone from the roots. And it really doesn't give you a nice compositing result to that. So here, what I can do is just start to move this albedo matching up. And by doing that, I'm going to start to kind of adjust the overall kind of color matching or in color balance to this. And so now I get more of a better blended look to this. Also, what it's doing, since we're changing some of the color here in these kind of cracked areas of these roots in the height, we're starting to see the color value from that this rocky ground come through, and it really starts to make this look a lot more blended. So here in our 3D view, this is the result that we start to get here. From this. So this particular node is really just about taking different materials and blending them based on the height information. And just so we can kind of see this, I'm gonna hit 1 on the keyboard, and I'm gonna come over here to the height output, and let's just take a look at this height map. So this right here is the height map for the roots, and this one here is the height map for the rock. And then we're doing a blend between this. So a question here about can we determine the which albedo we match to which. It's really based off at this stage because there's not a lot of control in it when we take a look at it from this albedo matching. So it looks like it's taking it based on whatever you put for that base or that first material is gonna take precedence on what that color value stream is going to be. So like later we're going to take a look at this color matching node, and you can actually choose specific color values, but in this case what it's doing is it's matching the second material to whatever that first material input is. And so that's how you work with the material height blending. It's really simple but yet a very powerful node. So another thing that we have that works kind of in the same vein of being able to blend materials based on height is our water match, our water level. So let's do this. I'm gonna hit my space bar here, and I'm gonna do a search for this water level node. And we'll add this guy in. Again, first step, come over here to our channels and enable the channels that we have. Now you'll see here by default, this particular one was already set to work with the metallic roughness. So it's base color, rough, and metallic are already enabled. So I don't have to do anything here. But just a note, if you are working in spec gloss, you could easily change that. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is take my roots and I'm going to plug this guy in here to my water level. And then I'm just going to middle mouse, click and drag this guy here into my 3D view so we can now, view what this is. And I'm just kind of rotating my cube here. Let me just find a good kind of like lighting setup here for this. All right. So this node here, it's just a quick kind of utility node for being able to add like water puddles. It's great. I really wish we had this a while back because when I've had to do materials before, I actually did a course maybe last year I think it was, where we had to like manually create like water puddles using mask and all that stuff, and it was a pain to set that up. But now we have a simple node to do that. So here, again, it's really simple on how to use this node. So we have things like our water level. So I can just decrease the water level to, of course, decrease that effect here on our actual, on our actual result here for the blending. So I'm going to set this down to around a value of like, say, 0.3. And the idea here, if I just kind of zoom in on this area, what I want to do is I want to create some kind of like water puddle areas. This right here is a really good spot to kind of view this. I really like what's happening here. So I see I've got this puddle, but what you really get with this node, since it's utilizing this height information for the blending, is you get kind of like this nice kind of depth type effect. So here you can see that, all right, the water level or the puddle is a little deeper, but then it starts to become more shallow. So here you can see that, well, it's still kind of wet in this area, but it's very, very shallow. And then here you can see that we got just some of the water here where we basically are just kind of creating mud for the dirt. So we've got like a full puddle all the way up to just mud, which is really nice. And we can actually go and start to tweak some controls for that. So with that, if I'm taking a look at this root here, I can see that, well, it's really kind of in this puddle area, but it dries up really quickly, this root, and I don't really like that. So what I can do is come over here to like my edge wetness distance, and I can start to increase that. So here, as we start to increase this value, all right, a little too much. Like I said, the system's kind of running a little slow for me because I'm actually trying to blend all this stuff in 4K, which is not great. I think what I might do to try to speed things up, because yeah, here you can see that this guy's outputting right here at 4K. Let me do this. Let me select my node here, and let me set this to be absolute. And I'm just going to change the size to that, just so we can kind of speed things up. And here I'm just changing the resolution here again. All right, so just bear with me for just a moment as we kind of try to get this resolution set a little lower. It should be changing. Here, let me do this then. Let me drop back over here to, let's see, roots. See what's actually happening here with this, and it's becoming kind of more trouble to kind of get all this set up. So what's happening here is when you have like a texture input that comes in and you have a node, this is like a bitmap node. You'll notice that bitmap nodes are always going to have their output size here set to be absolute. So in this case, even if I change my graph here, it's not really, that's why it's not doing anything. So what I need to do with this guy is just change the actual bitmap node itself. So let me just do that really quickly so we can get just a little bit better performance. And I'm actually working on a laptop as well too, so that's another kind of reason why my performance is a little bit lower than I like. Okay, so we get that, and we'll just do that really quick here for our rocky ground. While I'm doing this, I'll also make a note here that sometimes this is a kind of a technique that I'll use when I'm trying to, if I have any embedded bitmap textures, sometimes I'll come in and make sure that I kind of set these guys to be a cap to resolution. Instead of like, you know, because you would want to make sure that, you know, in this case, maybe I don't want these to be exact 4K like this. All right, there we go. Okay, so we'll go back here. So another question that came in talking about resolution, what's the limit of Substance Designer? So yeah, Substance Designer has a limit based on the GPU engine. So just to kind of explain that kind of quickly, if you come over here to your tools, you can actually switch the engine. So you'll notice here that I'm at DirectX. I'm using DirectX 10 here for this. It's just talking about the version of the Substance engine. And this guy here is running at the GPU engine. This SSE2 was what we refer to as the CPU engine. Now, the CPU engine is only capable of 2K maximum textures. If you run the GPU engine, you can go up to basically as much as your system can work with. So 4K, 8K, 16K I haven't really tried in Designer before. So you can do 8K or 4K if you would like, but you have to do that here through the GPU engine. Okay, so going back here, just kind of recomputing this graph. All right, now we're at 1024, so we can get just maybe a little bit better performance out of this guy. All right, so like I was saying, what I wanted to do was kind of have like these roots. I felt like they were a little bit too dry. So what I did was I come over to this edge wetness distance, and I can change that. So you can see if I drop this value down really low, like I said, the root looks really dry. So what we want to do is have some of that moisture from this bottom area kind of, you know, kind of move itself or kind of creep up from the bottom up towards the top. And we can do this with our edge wetness distance. So as I do that, you can see where now I'm starting to get some kind of wetness here on top. And then we can control that intensity here with this edge wetness amount, basically. And so that, again, just gives me a little bit more of kind of a realistic blend with what I'm doing here. So another way to kind of change things to, kind of get this to be a bit more custom is we have things like this sludge color. So here you can see that we have, and again, this is a feature that I really, really like. So here at this sludge color, this is kind of like the water that's kind of right in the middle of the puddle, or it's almost like the deepest area. And then as we come up here around the edges, you can see that we get kind of like this darker rim around this. If you did watch that training that I did previously on, creating water puddles and such, what I was doing was having to create like a mask for the puddles and then having to do like an edge mat that was going to handle like the color value for the kind of like the middle area, and then another edge mat to be, the edging here so we could make that darker and so on. But now you get all that for free when you're just utilizing this water level node. Now to control these color values like this, it's basically kind of what this sludge color depth and opacity is. So for example, if I wanted to do something, maybe just a different color, like a little more something like this. I'm going a little bit extreme so that you guys could really see that here in the video, but that's a way to kind of change that coloring here. And then we have this sludge depth. So if I lower this value, you can see that it's basically taking away that coloring, and as I pull this up higher, we get more of that coloring there. And then here we actually have this nice opacity setting, which is good too for that. And then here we also have this depth blur amount too. So we can get, if you start to see some, here, let's take this all the way down. What this is doing is you'll start to get around the edges of where, you know, the height maps are blending like this. It could get, you know, some hard edges and such. So what we can do is just do basically a depth blur of that blended height map. And then we also have an opacity setting for that. So this allows you, like I said, just to quickly create water puddles, and you have a lot of control over this here. Also, a couple things, if you wanted to, you can, you know, introduce like some frosting here. So look, now we've got this kind of frozen and so on, and we can take the cracks away if we needed to. But it's just a way to kind of freeze that water puddle like that. So it's kind of really interesting. It's a really good effect, really great quality. These nodes are fantastic. I've really enjoyed working with them. And as you can see, it's really simple. What really makes this effect come together, though, is it all comes down to that height map. So you know, the better your height maps are, the better the effect is going to be. And so if you've watched some of the other courses I've gone through, and then here you can see that I've actually made a mistake with something here in my height. Sorry about this. Let's come over here to roots. I bet you I've got my height map set wrong. Yep. There we go. All right, so I just had the resolution on the height set differently. But like I've said, where I was going with that point was one of the things I've said in kind of other training that we've done is the, you know, when I'm creating materials, I'm always trying to work, you know, I start with height first to really get kind of the overall, you know, kind of feel of the surface of the material. You know, we can kind of help define the silhouette of the shapes and all that stuff. And once we kind of have that height information, from there is where we can, you know, easily derive like our normal and our AO, all these kind of surface intricate type details and variations that really make a material realistic and come to life. So that's one of the things I always try to talk a lot about is, you know, the height map is very important. Your normal maps, things like that are very important for describing your surface detail. Once you have those things, being able to extrapolate things like roughness and then later on doing color becomes much easier. So my whole point in that is these new filters really sing when you have a great, a really good or well-defined height map. So that kind of takes care of our water level. Just another one here. We've got that's called snow cover. So let's take a look at this guy. Again, this one is automatically being set here for metallic roughness, so we don't have to worry about you know, those channels. So we'll get this guy into place. I'll just drag this into here. And what I have here is a pretty intense map, or environment map here. There we go. All right, so what this is going to do, and we're losing some of the detail here because I actually dropped this down to 1024. So if we kept this at 2K, we could see a lot more detail here in the snow, like some of the flakes and such. But again, like I said, I'm running this on a laptop. I'm trying just to keep it kind of fast because we're really talking about these tweak settings and so on. But anyways, this one's doing basically the same as the water level, except in reverse. So you can see that now the snow kind of piles or builds up versus the water where it kind of, you know, swells up from the bottom up. The snow's from the top down, basically. So here we can just start to add more snow. So as I start to just increase this slider here, you see we get our snow effect. A lot of good controls for this. So for instance, this build-up control here. So if we start to just pull this build-up, it's going to help us with just the overall kind of build-up look of the snow and how it's just piling on top of itself. And then here we have just a smoothness slider just to kind of smooth that out. So here, if I drop this value, let me zoom in. You'll see that we've got a lot of lumpiness here in noise. So if we just want to smooth that out, we can do this here. and that gives us just a bit more kind of blanketed snow smoothness. And then here you have this flakes intensity. So I'm just going to drive this up really, really high so we can see this. And I'll move my light over. So what you see right now, it looks like kind of like dirt noise. Again, it's just because of the way I've got my light all the way over here in like the darkness like this. This flakes intensity, when it actually hits like the specular light, so if we have it at 0, you can see it just looks really smooth. This is just giving you kind of like that snowflake kind of intensity value. So like when the light hits, here, let's start to move our light here. We start to get more kind of different, little specular hits off each one of those flakes like that. And so we can adjust that based on that intensity, which is pretty good. Another thing that's really cool for this guy is this melted snow. So here we have this snow level here. So we build this guy up pretty big. And then I'm just going to start to introduce some of this melted snow on top. So what this is going to do is let me start to just, kind of give that effect that some of this snow has started to melt away here. And if we look, you can see that here's our roots. And here in our root where we have some of these cavity areas, some of these cracks and so on, we still get some of that snow kind of built up into that area. And we can control that based on our build-up slider here as well. But we can see in this build-up slider, again, you can sort of see it taking place kind of in this area. So if I hit this build-up, it's just kind of pushing the height map up, like, again, like snow mounds, basically. And so I really like this melted snow feature here because we can just, drag this guy down a little bit, about right there, and then it really just gives you that more of that realistic kind of blending between that. And again, all this comes together because of how the height map stuff is blending. And so this new height blending type feature, again, we've added this to work with scan data, but it'll work with any, if you're working with procedural substances, it doesn't really matter. Just as long as you have, really good quality height information, you'll really start to get some nice effects like this. Okay, so that's kind of covers some of these kind of blending type nodes here. The other thing I want to look at now is some of these utility nodes, and we just recently did a blog post on this new ambient occlusion node. So I want to kind of show that now. So let me see if I got an image I can test this with. Let me look at what this guy is. Let's try this guy here. So this right here is some tire marks in the mud, basically. So if I hit the space bar and I start to do a search for my ambient occlusion, we're going to have two ambient occlusion nodes. So now you have this HBAO, which is horizon-based ambient occlusion, and then you have like our default ambient occlusion. Let's use our default ambient occlusion to start. And what it needs here is just a height map. So it's, nothing's changed, same as before. So let me just grab a height map here from that tire mark. And again, right now, everything I'm working with, this is all scans. So this is a scan, and we'll plug this guy into our AO, and this is the effect that we get. So we're able to adjust things like my spreading, and then I have some controls for adjusting like the low and middle and high frequencies and so on. But the result I get, it's not great. There's not a lot of detail that we can really see in this node. So now what I want to do is just show you the new ambient occlusion node. And again, it's this one here. It's horizon-based ambient occlusion. Let's just bring this guy in. And I'm going to use that same height map. And so now you can see the difference that we get. It's a complete change. I mean, it's 100% improvement. If we look and zoom in, you can see we get really great, intricate height or ambient occlusion information just with zero change. It's really nice. Look at these tire tracks here, and you can really see a lot of just great detail. I mean, huge difference over this versus this. And then we also have a control here for our height depth. So height depth. So here, if I just want to lessen that effect, maybe I'll do something like this. This is kind of a really nice ambient occlusion map here. Two settings to really think about with this. Let's see. Well, first, here's our radius. And again, just another setting here we can change here for our radius. I'm just going to leave this all the way up to 1 as it is by default. So one of the things here you get is this GPU optimization. So right now I'm using the GPU engine, so I'm just going to enable this to true. and it's just going to let me work a little faster here with this. Now, one of the things that I want to point out, like I talked a little bit earlier about resolution, and we were talking about this switch engine, and you have your two engines. If you are working with the CPU engine, which is the SSE2 engine, if you do have that enabled, and then you turn on GPU optimization, it's going to have the reverse effect. So basically, you're going to get lower performance or bad performance. So only utilize this GPU optimization if you are in fact using the GPU engine. And that's really all you got to do. You just plug in your height map and bam, you got this awesome AO map. Another setting here is this use world units, and a lot of these new nodes that we created specifically to deal with scan data is going to have this world units value to it or option. So let's look at that. So if we enable that here, you can see I get a different result. But what this allows me to do is determine the settings based on specific real world measurements. So the surface size is talking about the surface size of the asset in your I don't know, it depends on like if it's in your 3D application and you're just doing a rendering, or it's you know, the surface size of the polygon basically, or the surface size of what the environment is inside the game engine, you know, whatever you're working out with that. So typically if you're using that and you're working with I don't, it depends. Like if we're thinking about this in terms of game development, we're thinking about maybe how you might set up whatever your surface measurements are going to be. So for example, you could say like, well, for every meter in my game engine, it's going to equal 1 unit and so on. So basically, this is kind of what you can utilize that surface size setting for. Here we have the height scale, and this is to work within centimeters. So again, if we're looking with height, or excuse me, scan data, which was created with photogrammetry, you're going to have a real world measurement to there. So we're saying the height of 30 centimeters. So if I can go in and start to lower this to something more like 3 centimeters, which is more accurate to the real world, I'm getting kind of that same look that I got before. So this can be, again, very important if you're using scan data and you do need to use world units to set up what the settings are going to be. In my case here, I'll just turn this to false, and I'll just drag this slider till I get the effect that I want. And so that's our new ambient occlusion node. All right, so another thing that I want to show that I'm really excited about, this is another node that I'm going to use quite often, is this non-uniform histogram scan, or excuse me, yeah, that's right, histogram. Let me come over here to this material so I can show it. So this here is a material that's part of the Getting Started series for Substance Designer. Okay, so here's another thing I'll just talk about really quick. So notice that I've switched here my scene, and the scale is completely crazy. So one problem that we've been having with Substance Designer, this is 5.6 I'm using, our primitives here, so our geometry, our primitives, the scaling was off for all of these guys. So a lot of these material settings that we were getting, so if you come over here to materials and you edit this material, you can see that I have a scale. These scale values were really intense or high because of the difference in the size of the actual meshes. So we had a problem with that. But in 5.6.1, which we just released within the last few days, actually I think it was last week, we set all of the geometry primitives to be 100 centimeters. So this actually works out better for all of the scale and everything. So you won't have this problem. So shame on me for not using the latest version of Substance Designer. I'm using the old version still, so that's crazy. But anyways, I just wanted to bring that out because it is a very helpful change to that. All right, so this was, just like I said, a material, and this was something that was part of the original the newer Getting Started series that we have in Substance Academy. And with that, I'm just going to take, instead of using like kind of this whole entire material, I'm just going to take this portion of the material, middle mouse, with my right mouse button. I'm going to click and then just drag it here to my viewport so I can just view that particular node here into the viewport. And so I'm looking at kind of like this rust. And so what I actually did in that training was we used the histogram scan node here to create this kind of rust effect. Let me just grab another kind of version of this histogram scan, and I'm gonna plug this in. So right now what I have, this is a grunge map. So if we look at this guy, this is just a grunge map here. And it's actually doing a little bit of a blending mode and add subtract of this little edge map that I created and so on, just to get this effect. So here's my histogram scan, and what this guy does is you have your position and your contrast, and if I take my position, I move it up, it's a really good tool for just, well, scanning through the values and just showing, you know, basically the dark range versus the brighter range. And as I do this, you get this effect of a nice slider for dialing up effects like rust and so on. So it's really what the histogram scan can be used for a lot. And then we have this contrast setting here. So this has been kind of a powerhouse node for me. I've used it in pretty much every material I ever work on. But what's happening here is this is just doing a very uniform look at these values. So what I have here is just, like I said, my current grunge map, and I'm just running it through a scan position, and I'm just basically scanning through the light and dark values to show more of the bright values, and or if I go to the opposite end, I'm showing more of the darker values and so on, or getting rid of some of the kind of low end dark values, I'll say. So like you can see, as I go down towards the end, I'm just seeing these really bright white values. And like I said, this is doing this on a very kind of uniform way of working here. Now, we included a new node or a new version of the histogram scan that allows us to input maps to basically vary this, and we're calling it the non-uniform histogram scan. So I'll hit the space bar and I'll just start to type in non, and you'll see here we've get this or histogram scan non-uniform. And now I want to show you the difference that you get with this. So let's just come into here, and like I said, it's got an input and then two maps. And you'll notice that it's the same controls, position and contrast, but now we can vary that based on maps instead of just a uniform slider, basically. So let's do this. Let's take our output of our grunge and put that here into the input. And for the input position and contrast input, I'm just going to take these guys and set them to false. So what we have here is, now that these are set to false, you can see that what I'm doing, if I just set my contrast up pretty high, I essentially have the exact same node that I was working with before. All right, so we'll just set this guy up. Just a position, I'm scanning through the position value here, and I'm just doing this with the uniform slider. So it's the same exact thing. But now I can choose to use an input map for this position. So I'm going to enable this guy. And I need to get an input, a map for this. So let me just come over here to my noises and try to find a noise here. Here, I'll tell you what, there was one that I had back here that was decent, I think. Yeah, let me just borrow this grunge map. So here's what this grunge map looks like. And what I'd like to do is have the value ranges of this grunge map derive the position. So I'm just going to take this and plug it into my position map, and we'll view this. So now I have control over my position, but as I do it, it's being varied based on this secondary grunge map that's coming into the position. So what I get is a much more organic look to how this is going to work. Now my contrast, again, is still this manual control. So here's what I'm getting here. So another way to get this even more realistic is, let's grab another noise. So here I'm going to hit the space bar and do a search for this moisture noise. And I'm going to use this guy because it's got some varying contrast to it. So here you can see that we got some sharp contrasty details, and then here we've got this, kind of blobby blurred areas. So we're going to get, a stark difference between contrast and non-contrasted areas. So let's look at our histogram scan, and let's plug this guy into our contrast map. And we'll enable our contrast map. So now I've got my contrast, but it's being driven or it's being varied based on that input map that I have. So now that we have this, let's replace our original our histogram as the grayscale input to this. And now look at the effect that we get. It's totally just a huge difference in the type of effect that we're getting here. So this was kind of like what I did before. Okay, it does the job. It's supposed to simulate roughness, but what this does is it looks exactly like a computer-generated noise, and that's definitely what we don't want. So now we'll use the new version, and this looks a lot better, you know? I mean, we could still use different maps and do a lot of tweaking, but we get a totally different result here. And when I start to dial this in and out, you know, we're just getting a lot varied result. So you can see, you know, it's going to collect, it's collecting over here in these clumps more. It just looks more organic and natural versus what the other way looked like. I really love this node. This thing is just like a powerhouse node. So like I said, I might set my contrast down to here. And now I'm getting more kind of a streaky looking type effect here to this rust, and so on. And like I said, this helps with the whole variation concept. And one of the things that I always like to really stress is that when it comes to creating procedural materials, variation is key. So it's very easy for you to create a material in Designer and have it look like a procedural computer-generated material because we're just using procedural noises and so on. But the more that you can layer in variation to your materials, the more realistic and the more non-computer generated they're going to look. And so doing an effect like this before, you'd have to, you know, do this on your own. You'd have to, you know, try to augment these grunge maps with different noises and so on to get something like this. And it would take more time and it would take more effort. Now, just using that simple node and inputting in some values, we can get this effect, which is way better in a fraction of the time. And so that's one of my favorite nodes here. So I would say in this release that we have so far, and kind of what I'm showing here is my favorite nodes being the material height blend, that first one that we showed, the new horizon-based ambient occlusion, and then this non-uniform node here. These guys are just fantastic nodes that I've been using just in every material I work in. All right, so I think we got time for another node here. So another thing that we've added was, again, this one goes back to working with scan data. So I had mentioned to you early on about that in that material height blend node. Here, let's go back to my demo graph here. And just waiting for things to load up here for just a second. There we go. So like I said, not this water level, it was this guy. So here we had this albedo matching, and we just had a slider to that. Well, I wanted to say, you know, internally that's based on this new color match node that we have. So let's hit the space bar and do a quick search here for color match. And I'm just going to use this guy again. I'll tell you what I'm going to do, though. Let's hit 1 on the keyboard just to kind of expand my channels. And I just want to look at this base color, so just this guy here. All right, so I'm going to take my base color and plug that here into my color match. And then we'll double-click so we can kind of view this guy. So here, let's kind of get rid of our 3D view somewhat. And let's look at what's happening here. All right, so if we look at the parameters that we have here for this guy, what this guy is going to allow us to do is, it helps with matching colors and setting values. And I'll show you what it's really kind of good for. So, for example, when we first load up this node, we have this source color mode, and it's set to average. And then you have a couple other parameters. So average, what that means is, if we take a look at this first input here, that average option is talking about kind of the median value range. Okay, so if we look at this image on a whole, tonality-wise, I would say this image is weighted pretty heavily towards kind of brownish, maybe yellowish type values. But then if we look, we get, you know, a color that's completely out of that median average, and that's this green plant here, this, you know, this really kind of brighter green area. So like I said, it's way above the median average of this overall kind of brownish hue that this image has. So when we run this through the color match, what that does is, on an average, it allows us to make changes to the color value of the median range of that image. So in this case, we can now start to do some color correction on all of those kind of brown hues. And so you can see here that we have this target color, and it's just set to gray by default. So that's why we get kind of this washed out gray. So if you can notice here, that green, it's totally left alone. It's not part of that median average value, so it retains its green value. But then our actual average value, you can see that we can now change that. So now, if I wanted to, I could come over here to my color editor, and I can just make changes to this guy. So for example, let's say that maybe I'll set it to something more like this. So now I'm doing some color correction, but I'm doing it not just like on a overall kind of setting. I'm doing it on the median average value of what that is, because my color mode here is set to average. So this is kind of the color correction I'm going with here. So here we have this, and now we have this. So again, if I come back, let's just set this to something more like, well, not so dark. Let's do this. And then kind of lower the value. So then what I can do here is just kind of desaturate some of that warm tone. So here you can see got this warm tone value, and now here's another version where I've just kind of removed some of that down. But some of the data I retain. So like you can notice what's really cool about this is that like here you can see kind of like these little grass or thistle part here from the tree, you know, those are being affected mostly by this targeted color, again, because they fall within that average median tonal range. But these rocks and such are not really getting affected so much. So if we go back to the rock, you can see, again, these are these bright areas that are a bit higher in tonal range. So we can now do, you know, color corrections and get some pretty cool results like this. Another thing that we can do with this, if we set this to, say, parameter here, we can then go in and start to change or pick a source color. So if I pick a color like this green, I can now go into that targeted color and I can actually change that. So now I'm just changing that specific value. So let's see, let's go to the green. And just adjusting my value a bit here. So what I'm doing is just attempting to just kind of knock off or knock down some of that green range that I had before. So here's what we had before, a lot of green. Now I've just kind of corrected that a bit to be just a little bit more brown, you know? So again, just another way I can kind of just edit these color values for this. So just a question I'd like to address right now. So one of the questions here that you guys can all read here in the live chat about the how far are we going? A true 3D scan pipeline end to end from designer to painter. Let's see what we would like to do, and that's really cool. So you'd be willing to provide data to Algorithmic. Yeah, we'd love to talk to you about that. So I'll tell you what. Let me just here in the chat window. So basically, I know the stream's delayed here from when I'm typing and talking, so I'm trying to kind of balance the two here. So please contact. All right, so I'll say please contact. All right, so Transpose 3D, very cool. We'd love to talk with you on that. So yeah, I put my email there in the chat window, so just please contact me and we can do some dialogue offline on that. In terms of what we're thinking about doing is we see Substance Designer as a tool that's not limited to any types of inputs. So for example, we have Substance Designer and it's a tool for creating procedural materials, but you can also work with bitmaps that you create, maybe hand-painted bitmaps or whatever, wherever. Maybe you have a texture library, maybe it's resources you found online, or maybe it's scan data that you get from another source. It could even be from Megascans. It doesn't matter. We work with all types of scan data, texture inputs, and so you can use that stuff here within Designer to generate your materials. And so what we're doing is we're adding more and more tools for working with scan data. As far as our end-to-end approach, of course I don't have the full roadmap, and unfortunately I would not be able to discuss it, but we're not looking at saying, okay, we as Algorithmic are going to have scanning devices and we're going to start scanning materials and we're going to start providing that. That's not really our goal. Our goal is to create tools that can be agnostic to the texture inputs so the artist can get the data from wherever they want, whether it be from a scan data like something like what like maybe Megascans could provide, or XYZ texturing, or any number of other texturing solutions out there. So any of those kind of inputs can be used. And what we want to do is empower artists to have the tool set so that they can work with that input. And so that's really our focus. Our focus isn't on becoming like, hey, we're gonna get a bunch of scanners and start making. That's not what we're doing, and we don't have any goals or any type of drive to do something like that. Our drive is in the tools and helping artists to work with the inputs that they have. So with that said, we started this with Designer, and we're also moving to having this type of technology be placed inside of Painter. So one of the things that we did recently at our Substance Days event, I say recently, it was like back in July. Here we are in 27 now. I mean, it feels like it just happened like a week ago, but it was back in July when we did Substance Days. We actually showcased some new technology that's coming to Painter, and you guys will see that pretty soon. We got more demos and more things to show at GDC, which is coming up in February. So what we're going to be able to do with that, and you can look online on our site. I don't actually have the link with me right now, but if you just go to our YouTube channel, you can see in the playlist we'll have some information, or just check through our playlist. I can't remember which one it is, but there's a video that shows Substance Painter working with height data. And so the way I was kind of showing this height blending here with some of these nodes, we're doing some of this, but in a much more, I would say, complex way inside of Painter. Now, complex meaning like under the hood, what's happening, but user-wise and artist-wise, it's super easy. But yeah, what we're doing is being able to paint and work with height data and blending scan data right there within Painter, and being able to visualize that right into our viewport. So like, anyways, check out that video. You'll see it's really cool on what we were able to do. And a lot of some of this stuff, like I was showing here with the snow cover and the water levels and all that stuff, all those tools are all coming into Painter as well. With the added benefit of being able to, work and paint and work with that data directly instead of just using sliders. But another thing about that is that, we're also going to have displacement rendering in the viewport within Painter as well, so you'll be able to see all that. So that's kind of like our roadmap of kind of where we're planning to go with that. So here, just kind of going back to this color match node, like I was saying, the last thing we showed was this ability to go into this parameter node, so I can target a specific value range there in the image. We have two outputs. We have the output, which we're viewing here, which is the color output, and then right below that we have the mask. So in my case, this is the mask that I'm generating based on this parameter where I chose the source color to try to target kind of like the green kind of vegetation and stuff. But here you can see that I can actually start to tweak this mask here. So I can blur the mask. So notice that it was a little, here, let's zoom in on it. It's pretty aliased here, so I'm just going to smooth that out with a little blur. I got a little smoothness here as well that I can choose. I'm losing too much of my shape with that, so maybe I don't want to smooth too much. But basically you can see that I'm able to, work with that mask directly through some controls as well to get some really nice masking effect here as I start to work on that color correction. So color mask is just another one of the nodes that we have there as well. So we're just about just a little over an hour, so we're looking to try to keep these webinars right about an hour. So that's going to pretty much conclude this one. And like I said, what we've really been going over is a lot of the new filters we had in 5.6. And we're actually thrilled to also have our new, streaming here through YouTube, which I'd love to get some feedback from you guys. Like I said, just as normal, we're going to be sending out a recap email of the course and any source content that we can give out to you guys. So please just let us know if this works pretty good, if the chatting system, you guys having more direct access to the videos afterwards, if that's going to work better for you guys, just let us know. Also like to say that Alexon is not really working on the education webinar side anymore. He's kind of had to move up, and he's taking on some other kind of exciting responsibilities within the company. He's still doing education work, but he's kind of had to move on to do some other things. So what I'd like to do is introduce you guys to Charles. So Charles was setting out the first email and stuff. So Charles and I are going to be the ones kind of continuous on forward. So like I said, Charles is going to throw out that recap email and everything. So this conclude this one. Next webinar, I think we're going to do some really cool UE4 stuff. So stay tuned for that. And again, as always, if you guys have any suggestions, please let us know. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next webinar.